Welcome to the Navseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, listeners, to episode 86 of the Navseam podcast. My name is Dr. Jeff Winkle, and I am here down in Vomitorium East with my good friend and co-host David Noe. How you doing tonight, Dave?
I'm doing real well. I learned something recently.
What's that?
The place we are recording, this is called Swan Lake.
Is it really called Swan Lake?
Yes, it really is.
Right.
Now, we see the cygnets cruising around the water, chasing the geese and so forth. The lake has a name. It's Swan Lake, and it's idyllic, isn't it?
It is very nice. Isn't it also, that's like the one ballet name I know. Isn't it like Swan Lake? Isn't it a famous ballet?
I think it is a famous ballet.
Yeah, but I would never have known the name of this lake, or even guessed that it had a name.
It has a name. Everything has a name.
Yeah.
It's like a locus amoenus, I think.
It is very much a locus amoenus,
It's
right?
too beautiful.
Yeah.
Something terrible is going to happen in this location, like maybe a podcast. How are you feeling tonight, Jeff?
I'm feeling good. I had a good week. I got to visit Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
Last week.
Windy Apple.
The Windy Apple. My son graduated from 8th grade, and he wanted as his gift, he's always wanted to go to the art museum there.
Sweet.
And I have not been there for probably 20 years.
It's a good antiquities collection, if I'm not mistaken.
It's not bad. I mean, if you compare it to some other museums around the country.
I haven't been to the Met in New York. Have you?
I have not been to the Met either,
No.
but they have a decent Greco-Roman collection. But I mean, just the breadth of the stuff there. We were, my wife and my son and I were in there for about 5 hours.
Incredible.
It was great. And so my son is an aspiring sculptor, painter. He's just fascinated by art. And
He's
so
the guy that does the
great.
claymation stuff
Does
too.
the claymations,
Wow.
all that kind of stuff. So he was absolutely fascinated by it. And
So talent runs in the family.
Yeah,
on the mother's side.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So yeah, that is all of that to say is that I'm feeling good. I'm feeling rested and ready to go.
Yeah. All right.
Yep.
Good. So what are we going to give the people tonight?
Well, we're going to carry on our look at Vergil's Aeneid, Book 2.
Book 2.
Reminding the audience, this is Dave's favorite.
Yes, it is.
Part of the Aeneid.
And in fact, before we get to the shout out, before we get to the opening quote, would you like a little anecdote?
Yes, give me an anecdote, would you?
Okay, so it was about the year 1995-96. I'm a young grad student at the University of Iowa, and a visiting scholar by the name of Vasily Rudich came to campus to lecture on the topic of Laocoon. Now, Vasily Rudich taught at Yale from 84 to 95. I looked him up a little bit. He's the author of Political Dissidence Under Nero, The Price of Dissimulation. He's also the author of Religious Dissent in the Roman Empire, Violence in Judea, at the time of Nero. Now, neither of these books have I read, but I want to now because he's a fascinating scholar. And here's the anecdote.
Yeah.
Over supper, as we were talking about Roman poetry generally, he revealed to us, not in a braggadocious way, that he had memorized all of Book 2.
Really?
Every line of the Latin of Book 2 of the Aeneid.
Did you make him prove it?
No. In hindsight, maybe I should have. But I was just dumbfounded.
Yeah.
Because he said it is the most, gorgeous piece of Latin poetry, words to this effect, that have ever been written. He also said, this was a shocking claim, he said, if I could have access to Ovid's play, the Medea, Ovid wrote a tragedy, right, the Medea, Lost, he said, I would give up 10 years of my life.
Really?
For a chance to read Ovid's Lost Medea.
Oh my gosh.
And I had to think about that, and would I do that? Maybe if I could string together all the times I've watched, A Very Special Blossom or the Different Strokes reunion, if I could string all those times together, I'd give that up. But I don't want to just lop 10 years off the end.
No. Exactly that. If you could kind of
compress it.
If you could corral together all of that time wasted.
Right.
Exactly.
Down when you're getting a new driver's license or something.
Yeah. I'd happily give up that
Sure.
Right? Yeah.
To read Ovid's Medea.
Right.
But I was just so impressed. This is an individual. I'd never heard the name before. A well-known classicist. This is an individual who really loves this literature.
Yeah.
Made a big impact on me.
That is. So do you think that was instrumental in kind of you calling this book also your favorite? Or had you come to that conclusion before that?
I think it was, I don't know if it's instrumental. It definitely helped. Yeah, definitely helped.
Yeah.
A small instrument,
Right.
Maybe like a, eyeglass screwdriver or something. Not like a jackhammer.
No, not heavy industrial equipment.
No, not a big instrument. But I thought, wow. it's possible to really love Roman poetry and be very dedicated to it. It was an inspiring example.
That's amazing. I mean, just the idea of memorizing the entirety of these, 900 lines in this book or so?
Phenomenal.
Phenomenal, right?
And I have memorized a little bit of poetry, but nothing like that.
No.
So.
I think we talked, my first grad school assignment was to memorize the first 150 lines of the Iliad.
Yes.
And then perform them and comment
That's incredible.
on them. It was awful. And I quickly flushed it out of my brain once the assignment was done, but I never tried to.
Yes, but the important thing, Jeff, is it led to an episode of Ad Nauseam.
It did.
Back to the 9 things I hated about grad school.
It was in there. I think we mentioned
something like that.
So yeah, that was sowing the seeds for something very important down the line.
Okay,
yeah.
The shout out.
Yeah, who does that go to today?
So this goes to a man by the name of Rodney Kroom. Rodney Kroom is another one from the Pacific region.
We're huge there.
Yeah, he's from Hobart, Tasmania. I think he's the first Tasmanian that we know of who's listening to the show.
It's the first Tasmanian I've ever had any kind of contact
interaction with.
Yeah,
right.
Now, but Tasmania is an island off the south coast,
southeast coast of the Australian continent.
Right.
Yes, and so Rodney says regarding the Pacific, because in our correspondence, I said words to the effect of. The Pacific is really well represented in our recent shout-outs, and you mentioned it's Oceania.
Oceania.
Right.
Yeah.
And he said, it's winter here, so picture snow-capped mountains. Rodney's a poet, apparently. Picture snow-capped mountains and pedestrians shivering in the rain, rather than the palm trees and sun-kissed beaches.
I see. So they're suffering through winter right now. And,
yeah.
Right. And but around the bend in a few months they'll have the
That's
palm trees
right.
back. Yeah.
But their suffering is shivering in the rain.
Yeah.
Ours is shoveling 8 feet of snow. So not a lot of sympathy from me. But
no.
Rodney, thank you so much for listening to the podcast.
That's great. Yeah. And for the kind words you sent along. Yeah. That's wonderful.
And for contacting us. And we're really appreciative of that.
Yes. Thank you, Rodney.
And Jeff, I believe you have the opening quote for us tonight. Here's hoping you like it.
Yes. So as I was reading the rest of book 2 in preparation for this, I was reminded of this is, I don't know if I would say it's one of my favorite scenes because it's so dark, but one of the most powerful pieces of literature that I have ever encountered in Greek or in Latin is the death of Priam.
Right.
And it's I think it's in some ways it is the lowest point in this book.
Now, before you read the quote, can I ask, can you summarize as succinctly as possible what is it about Priam's death that moves you?
It's one detail, and I remember when I read this for the first time as an undergraduate. It's when Priam is being killed, and Vergil gives us the detail that he slips in the blood of his own son. He's just seen, and we'll talk about this. He's just seen his own son murdered in front of him. And then one of his last physical acts is to slip in the blood of his son. And that just gives me chills. It's so horrifying, but it's so darkly beautiful too, in some way. Yeah.
The one thing that struck me was that Priam suited up before Neoptolemus, Pyrrhus, approached. He pulled down some old weaponry from the walls and puts it on, like an old combat veteran saying, well, I know I'm feeble and this is going to be ineffective, but I have to make do. And his wife mocks him at that point.
Yeah.
Right? Hecuba mocks him. And so it's such a picture of courage in the face of, such feebleness.
Yes. And it's pathetic in the root meaning of that word.
The strong pathos. I found that very moving as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a brutal scene front to back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the opening quote.
This is from an article called The Death of Priam by one Robert Sklenar. And this goes back to 1990 from the journal Hermes. He writes, the death of Priam is indisputably one of the great Vergilian set pieces, but Vergilian criticism has so far served it poorly, according it more reverence than attention. One of the few discussions that treat the Priam episode, most tend to exhaust themselves in a chaotic search for a single unifying problem which, once confronted, might surrender the scene's entire wealth of meaning. Although Richard Hines was right to observe that Priam's death replicates the fall of Troy, the symbolism that identifies Priam as the corporeal expression of his kingdom invites further questions about the significance of Neoptolemus as Priam's foil, of Aeneas as narrator, of Hecuba, of the scene's poetic structure.
So I can just interrupt here a little bit? I'm getting lost a little bit in the heavy academic prose.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit what this means here? Richard Hines Priam's death replicates the fall of Troy.
Yes.
And the symbolism, the three parts there.
Mm-hmm. So I think what he's saying is that he's saying, in the broadest sense, critics have treated this scene with reverence.
Okay.
And it's almost like it's untouchable.
Okay.
Hines went further and said, no, the Priam's death, it kind of represents it's the final nail in the coffin for Troy.
Okay.
And what Sklenar is saying, he says, we need to even look even closer. It's not just about Priam's death. It's about Neoptolemus's role and kind of the echoes of meaning and symbolism there. It's
okay. So
Aeneas is narrating. He's watching this.
All right.
His wife is there. So there's
Okay.
all these different perspectives.
So Neoptolemus or Pyrrhus, the son of Achilles,
Yes.
and the one who succeeds in slaughtering Priam.
Yes.
All right, so that's clear. Then the next part, Aeneas as narrator.
Aeneas is narrator, right?
What does this mean?
Well, I think he's what Sklenar goes on in the article to kind of to explore is that we're not getting this scene as it's not a third person narrator. It's not an omniscient poet telling us the story. It's Aeneas is telling the story to Dido, but he's telling it because he watched this before his
Right.
very eyes, and that adds kind of again another layer of pathos there that he's saying most critics ignore. Yep.
So it's like being an observer in the theater.
Yes.
He's a front row seat.
Front row seat. Right. And he's almost well, we can talk about this, but it seems like he's almost frozen. He's helpless.
Yes.
He can't do anything about this.
Like seeing something in a dream.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and the third part, the significance of Hecuba.
I'm not sure what Sklenar is getting at. I mean, I read the article a couple days ago. It didn't strike me as that was a huge part of his argument, but I mean, his wife also as an attendant to the horrors here. I think largely what he's saying is that to fully kind of appreciate the scene, you can't just focus on Priam. You have to focus on all these other people involved in the scene, watching the scene,
Okay.
to kind of get the layers of its meaning.
Okay, and I interrupted you, but can you read just the last quote of the opening quote? Because it's nice.
Yeah, so he says, all of these things are not isolated matters, but part of a thematic intarsia. There you go.
Yeah, intarsia. I think.
Is that how you say it?
Yeah, I think it's intarsia.
Intarsia, kind of the layered, the inlaid nature of it, right?
Yeah, intarsia and in Jane. So sorry.
Intarsia, whose elaborate beauty still awaits full appreciation.
Yeah. So an intarsia is you've got a flat piece of wood.
Yeah.
And you sculpt out of it. You make a substrate. And you make a pattern. It's like a parquet floor,
Yeah.
but in an object of furniture.
Right.
It's something I've never done, but always wanted to do.
It looks difficult.
Yes.
And when done well, it can be stunning.
It's a lot of sanding, a lot of coping saw.
Right.
Very careful fitting.
Right. It makes me think of the floor at the Boston Garden that the Celtics play on. Right. The parquet floor is full of intarsia.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Have you been watching the NBA Finals?
No, I haven't watched the NBA in probably about 20 years. But,
Okay.
But I know about
Ever
the parquet
since you retired from the game?
Exactly right.
So that's Robert Sklenar.
Yep.
And the death of Priam.
The death of Priam. So I don't know in the intervening 30 plus years if in his estimation people have fully appreciated it, but maybe Mr. Sklenar thinks that he's the only one who fully appreciates the scene.
I doubt that. But we're going to try tonight.
Yes.
We're going to try tonight to advance the audience's appreciation for this great scene,
Yep.
the death of Priam.
And others.
So what are we giving the people?
Well, we'll do our best. Whenever we make promises about what we're going to cover, we always seem to
break them.
We break them all the time.
Right. We'll cover 400 lines.
Right.
3 lines later, it's the end of the program.
We're going to do our best to get to the end of
Okay.
book 2, but no promises because there's so many incredible set pieces. We're going to start with the death of Laocoon. We've got the storming of the citadel in Priam's palace, the death of Priam, of course, the dragging away of Cassandra.
Right.
There's all kinds of horrible and wonderful things happening.
The almost death of Helen.
The almost death of Helen.
Right.
Right.
And we have one avid audience member whose initials are R.E.M., who's always telling us, hey, slow down. Let me nerd out on the material.
Right.
Don't go too fast. But, of course, we can't just please him.
No, are you suggesting that we should kind of walk down Mr. M's path tonight, or?
Well, I think we should, we should take our time.
Okay.
This great literature is not going to appreciate itself.
That's right. You're right. There's no need to rush.
No.
Right. For the sake of getting through it.
So we're picking up in book 2.
Yes.
We're at the appearance of Hector to Aeneas. Is that where we're starting out here?
Yeah. We did not get to that last time, did we?
Okay.
Right. So.
We finished up the actor Sinon.
Yes. Right. Who's involved in the elaborate ruse to get the horse into the city.
Right.
And then so Aeneas spends a lot of this book kind of on the knife edge of indecision. Right?
Yes.
He doesn't know what to do.
Running hither and yon in a darkened city.
Right. What really struck me about this book is that it seems clear to me that Aeneas, in telling his own story, it wasn't necessarily obvious to him that I'm in charge now.
Oh,
right,
I
you know,
see.
so like he's necessarily going to be the heir apparent. I mean, Hector is dead, right? Hector appears to him, but Priam is still alive when Hector appears to him. So it's this idea that, you know, Aeneas isn't kind of saying, yes, I'm in command, I'm going to lead the refugees out, but he has leadership thrust upon him.
Right. So this question of leadership with Aeneas takes us back to the Iliad, actually.
Okay.
And I think this is what Vergil is picking up on psychologically. So book 13 of the Iliad, this is Johnston's translation, we're introduced to Deiphobus, one of Priam's sons. As he thought about his options, as Deiphobus thought about his options, he thought his best plan was to find Aeneas. He met Aeneas standing at the back among the crowd, for Aeneas, who excelled among the warriors, always resented Priam for not showing him enough respect.
Oh.
So you've got the whole plot right there,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
Vergil, as a very careful reader of Homer, probably had much of Homer memorized, frankly.
Right.
He picks up on that, right? So there's the psychology of Aeneas' motivation. I'm as good as any of these Trojans, even Hector, but I never get any respect.
Right.
He's the Rodney Dangerfield of the Trojans.
That's so interesting. I love that detail. And so, you know, in book 2, you know, he's told, you know, his destiny twice. You know,
right.
Hector tells him in this ghostly appearance,
Right.
And then his wife at the very end says this to him, and so he has to have two people kind of tell him, it's you.
Yes, to prod him and goad him along.
Yeah.
Because the resentment alone wasn't enough. He needs some external motivation.
It strikes me as almost biblical, right? Is it that, you know,
Oh, yeah.
Aeneas is kind of the unlikely.
Right.
Here. He's a Gideon, he's a David,
Or a Jacob, even.
right?
Right.
Oh yeah, right.
The second born, who's a trickster and not really born to the role of, you know, founder of the people.
Yeah,
But he's eventually brought there
yeah,
through
yeah.
a series of, you know, providential arrangements.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's great stuff. Should we talk about the death of Laocoon?
We have to.
Right. So right after Sinon finishes his tale, you remember Laocoon, the priest. He's the one who says, you know, I fear Greeks, even when they're bringing gifts.
That's right.
He throws this spear that lodges in the side of the Trojan horse and kind of sits there, kind of wavering. And then after Sinon finishes his long dramatic tale, we see Laocoon. He's at an altar and he's sacrificing a great bull to Neptune.
Yes.
And suddenly these two great serpents come coiling out of the sea from the direction of Tenedos, the island where Vergil has told us that where the Greeks are hiding. And they come onto the shore and they snatch up Laocoon and his two sons and drag them to their watery deaths.
Yeah, and wolf them down.
Right. A short, meaningless anecdote here. Do you know the band R.E.M?
Yes.
Are you a fan or no?
No.
No? Okay.
No. I kind of like the... I haven't listened to them in years. I kind of like the sound a little bit that the band makes, but I don't really like that style of music, and I can't stand the vocals.
Gotcha. Okay.
Michael Stipe, right, is the singer?
Yeah.
I just find his voice so whiny.
I can understand that.
There's no timbre, no richness.
Gotcha. Well, I am a fan.
I figured.
And back in the day when I was in college, I was a massive fan.
Oh, really?
And one of the things I liked about Michael Stipe, I mean, he's an oddball and he writes odd lyrics.
Yes.
I kind of like that.
Okay.
But he'll often throw in these classical references. He talks about the Furies and makes Homeric references here and there. And there's a song off their album Murmur. It goes back to 1982 or so. Great album. And it's a song called Laughing. And the opening line, he sings, Laocoon and her two sons. And then it kind of goes into kind of meaningless kind of jibber jabber.
Okay.
But that line has always struck me, kind of being a classicist. I thought, what's he talking about there, and why is it her two sons? Right. And so the song has always kind of mystified me.
So you traveled to where Stipe lives, Georgia, or
down
somewhere?
to Athens, Georgia, to ask him.
Knocked on his door. Excuse me, Mr. Stipe. What's the deal with her two sons?
I did the lazy approach to the same idea. Was I checked the internet occasionally if he had been interviewed about this song, because I was curious, what was he thinking, right? I finally found an interview where somebody asked him and said, who is this Laocoon? And he said, oh yeah, it's this priest who gets killed by these two serpents. It's a great story. And the interview asked about a priest, so it's a he, and he goes, yeah, I just changed the gender for the fun of it. So I had always been thinking like he had meant something kind of deep and meaningful and interesting there, but no, he was just kind of goofing.
Yeah,
Right.
interesting.
So I waited 25 years to find that.
Worth the wait?
I'd say it was a little bit of a letdown.
Are they producing any more, I'm using scare quotes here, music?
R.E.M. disbanded about 8 years ago.
Oh, what a shame.
They came to a mutual decision that it was time to step away.
Okay.
Right.
So back to the death of Laocoon.
Yes, all right. You want to read us some Latin here?
Yes, you want me to start at 209?
209, yeah.
All right, so here we go. Fit sanatus spumantas alo jam quarvet enebant, ardentis quaculos suffecti sanguinet igni, sibilla lambe bant linguis vibrantibus ordra, difugimus vi sexangues elagmena certo, la ocoant petunt et primum parvo duordrum, corpora natordrum serpens amplexus uterque, implicet et miseros morsu de pascitur artus.
Wonderful. Right. And
Bloody.
very bloody.
Violent.
Right. And I remember my Latin prof, when I first read this, kind of pointed out all the S sounds.
Yes,
right?
the sibilants,
The
right?
sibilants, yes. Sonatus spumanti salo.
Right, it's supposed to put us in mind of the snakes.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Here's Lombardo's translation of that. They were almost ashore. Their eyes, they being the serpents, their eyes were shot with blood and fire, and their tongues hissed and flickered in their open mouths. We scattered, pale with fear, as the sea snakes glided through the sand straight for Laocoon. First they entwined the priest's 2 sons in great looping spirals, and then they sank their fangs into the boys' wretched bodies and began to feed. Isn't that awful?
I'm cowering over here.
Cowering. It was just a little bit more kind of beyond the Latin,
Yeah.
which you read. Then they seized Laocoon as he ran to their aid, weapon in hand, and lashed their scaly bodies twice around his waist and twice around his neck, their heads reared high.
Ooh.
That brutal.
Yeah, that's great.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, the ironies and the reversals here, you can see why it would be easy for the Trojans to think the gods just punished him
Right.
for throwing the spear into the side of the horse.
That's right.
And so they would conclude then, therefore we should accept this gift.
Correct. And immediately after the snakes do their damage, they slink off and they shelter at the shrine of Minerva.
Yeah, that's right.
At the foot of the statue.
Yeah.
So it's more divine providence, right? The gods are trying to tell us something.
Yes. Yeah, and it's just from the bird's eye view that we have. It's just so cringing that we see the Trojans
Right.
just kind of taking these steps towards their own doom.
Yeah, they're so duped. It's providential misdirection.
Yep.
So now we get to talk about the statue group.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites of all time.
I think I've seen it, four times, maybe 5.
I'm about the same for me.
Yeah.
But it's one of those that you could stand in front of for a very long time and just in taking all of the
Right.
the nuances. It's a disturbing statue.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, let me read from this esteemed scholarly source, Mr. W.I. Wikipedia.
Oh yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
know Wikipedia?
Oh, is that untouchable?
That's right.
Yeah.
The statue of Laocoon and his sons, also called the Laocoon group, the Italian Gruppo de Laocoonte, has been one of the most famous ancient sculptures ever since it was excavated in Rome in 1506. Who was in Rome in 1506?
1506. That's
Michelangelo Buonarroti?
Oh, that guy.
That guy.
Raphael too. Yeah.
Yes, and it was placed on public display in the Vatican museums where it remains. It is very likely the same statue that was praised in the highest terms by the main Roman writer on art, Pliny the Elder, or Pliny, as Dennis Miller calls him.
Pliny.
The figures are near life-size, and the group is a little over 6 feet in height, showing the Trojan priest Laocoon and his sons. Did you know they have names?
I didn't know this.
Yes, this is not from Vergil, but elsewhere. Antiphantes and Thymbraeus being attacked by sea serpents.
Those poor guys. It's the only thing they're famous for.
That's
is
right.
Being strangled by snakes.
Yeah, it's. I'm trying to think of an analog of someone who's famous for just one really bad thing.
Have you heard of the little person Eddie Goodell?
No.
Who the promoter of the White Sox?
Okay.
Was famous for his gags.
Okay.
He sent in this little person, like 3'5" guy.
Okay.
Up to bat with a plastic bat. Because he knew that his strike zone would be so small that he would get a walk.
Right.
And he got the walk, and he went to first base and got a pinch runner. It's the only thing that guy was ever known for.
Or how about the guy that you're a baseball fan? So
I am.
The guy in Wrigley Field who interfered with the catching of the foul ball.
Steve Bartman.
Is that his name?
Yes, that poor sap.
Yeah, that's the one thing he did, and he cost the Cubs the World Series, right?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
Right, yes. One of the big...
Poor guy.
The poor guy had to go into hiding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he was so hated.
Yeah.
Or maybe the Dutch kid who stuck his finger in the dike.
what was his name?
I don't know.
Hans, probably.
Hans van something, probably. So that's
what we got here.
That's
yeah.
Antiphontes and Timbrius.
Right.
But the really interesting thing about this story, and maybe we'll dedicate a gurgle to it, is that Michelangelo was in Rome at the time, working for the Pope Julius, if I'm not mistaken, and so he was called in right away when this thing was dug up. And what do you think of this? And he immediately recognized this is a Hellenistic masterpiece.
Yes.
This is phenomenal. And Laocoon, writhing in pain there between his sons, was used by Michelangelo as the model for the painting of Christ in the Last Judgment, which is inside the Sistine Chapel.
Right.
Sitting on that throne.
On the altar wall, right?
That's correct.
He's lifting up the righteous with his right hand, and he's
pushing down the
damned with his left.
That's right.
Yeah.
This was the inspiration, the musculature on the torso. It's really a phenomenal statue.
It is, and it's in that goriest of Hellenistic style, right?
Yes.
Where it kind of
ultra realistic,
detail for detail's sake. And so Laocoon's head is twisted back in agony.
Right.
His sons are looking kind of pathetically to their father for help that he cannot give. It's incredible.
If you have an extra $500 lying around, buy a ticket to Rome. Go to Rome, you can have the breakfast at the hotel, but make sure you get to the Vatican Museum.
Absolutely.
Skip the line and go see this and then fly home. It's worth the flight.
It's worth it. And I think in that same courtyard, the Apollo Belvedere is right across the way there, too. So
it's breathtaking.
Yep. All right.
So he's gone. That's it.
He's gone.
He's dead.
Yep. The Trojans misinterpret the scene.
That's right.
And the next part of the next stage of the wheel will turn.
And they drag the horse into the city. Now, I love this detail a lot because I think it shows exactly how clever the Greeks were. In order to get the horse inside the city, what did they have to do to the walls?
They had to take them apart.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what happened. This is the Krizak translation, line 235. We broke the city open then, laid ramparts bare, preparing for the work. Hooves rolled beneath that mare. On wheels and hemp-reins roped her neck, machine of doom. She climbed the city streets with weapons in her womb. It's pretty good. So
not bad.
The horse was approximately, I don't know, I like to think of it as the horse is, about 12 inches wider than the largest gate.
Yeah.
That Odysseus had to stand there looking at the walls thinking, I think it's about, it's maybe 14 and a half. Let's make the horse 16 feet.
Yes.
So they have to undo the walls to get the horse in. It's brilliant.
It's brilliant. Exactly.
You ever moved a couch to the second floor of some apartment of a friend or your own place?
Oh, it's brutal.
It is brutal.
Yeah, the geometry involved.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And you have to think that the people who make those couches, they look at the front door and they think, let's just make it about 12 inches wider than the door, so nobody can possibly
do it, right?
Without breaking their back.
Right.
It takes 5 guys to turn that couch around, and so this is what the Greeks did.
It did. So another kind of incredible small little detail to this plan.
Right. So the horse is in the city, and all havoc breaks loose.
Right. So after dark, the Trojans have gone to sleep. They think everything's done. Celebrations are in order, but in the deep depth of the night, the Greeks drop from the horse.
That's right.
Ulysses and a number of others are named by Aeneas there.
Right.
And they open up the gates, and then all the Greeks that had been waiting off the island of Tenedos are ready to storm the place.
That's right. Now, we don't really get the description here of Helen's involvement. We have to go back to the Odyssey,
right?
Book 4, how Helen approached the horse and imitated the voices of the men's wives.
Yeah. How
she knew they were in there and how she could do all their voices. Helen is like the Rich Little of antiquity,
right,
with the endless impersonations.
She's lying.
Okay.
I think she's completely lying, and then I think Menelaus kind of corrects her in that scene. But she presents herself.
Oh, she's lying to pretend she's on the side of the.
Yes, well, she's. I mean, I think she's lying. Well, I think for a number of reasons, but I think Homer's also trying to kind of present her as a kind of sorceress as well. Yeah, but Aeneas does not mention that particular detail.
No.
You're
going to read some of the Lombardo here about this event.
Yeah, Lombardo translates. The sky turned, and night swept up from ocean, enfolding in its great shadow earth and heaven, and the Myrmidons' treachery. The Trojans spread out along the wall were dead silent now, slumber entwining their weary limbs, and the Argive fleet started to sail from Tenedos through the silent, complicit moonlight. Making for the shore they knew all too well. The flagship raised a beacon, and at this signal, Sinon, cloaked by the gods' unjust decrees, stealthily unlocked the pine trap door. and the horse released from its open womb the enclosed Danaans, glad to push themselves out of the hollow oak into the cool night air. Thesandrus and Sthenelus and grim Ulysses sliding down the rope, Acamas and Thoas, Achilles' son Neoptolemus, great Machaon, Menelaus, and Epios himself, the fabricator of the insidious horse. They fanned out through a city drowned in sleep, slit the guards' throats, opened all the gates, and joined as planned the invading Greeks. That's another just beautiful passage. I mean, it's Lombardo's poetry
He
here.
did a good job.
It's a beautiful passage.
Oh, it's sublime in the original, but it's quite good in this English, I'd have to say.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Are there laws that govern war, and rightly so? Is this fair? Is this cowardice? Is this treachery? If you're Aeneas, are you upset not just because your city is falling, but, because they're cheating?
I think there's something to that. I mean, we've talked in, I think, the last couple of episodes about kind of this Roman view of deceit as kind of an inherent immoral action, right? And so I think I hear it in kind of Aeneas's description, like he mentions Epios, the guy that even made the horse is coming out of it, right? And so I think he's disgusted by the trick, but also in kind of embarrassed that the Trojans have fallen for it. And then we'll talk about in a little bit, when the Trojans themselves try some deceit on trying to escape from the city, trying to fight in the city, it completely backfires on them.
Right.
And so I just think that the Trojan view of things is it's noble, but it's a bit naive.
Yeah, it's Roman, of course.
It's Roman, right? Yeah. But it's noble, but that nobleness comes with kind of an inability, with a tendency to be outwitted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why don't you meet us on the open field of battle? Why not meet man to man? Let's have an actual fight, not this sneaking and skulking around snake-like.
Right. I think Ulysses would say, we tried that for 10 years.
Right.
Time for something new.
Yeah.
Right?
But he has no morals. Ulysses has no scruples.
No.
He loves his wife, but he'll do anything for a victory.
Right. I think there's also the sense that, so Achilles has died at this point. He's gone. And there's a strong...
You don't mean Achilles, do you?
Achilles is dead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Achilles he dies before the horse, right? He dies in the plains. And so I think there's definitely this sense that Odysseus, picks up the mantle.
Okay.
Says, now I'm in charge. We tried Achilles' way for 10 years. Now we're going to do it my way.
Right. We went with brawn. Now we're going to go with brain.
We're going to go with brains.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Well, before we get further into the city, into the horrors of this, should we break for the ads, Dave? Is it about that time?
I think we need to have some incongruous sort of statement here, like we've made in the past.
Okay.
Like, speaking of Grizzly, right? It's time for the ads.
Do you have one at the ready?
No. So just say a little bit more, and something will come to me.
Okay.
What about the dangers of deceit?
Yeah. Before we get into that, it reminded me of that. I think Vergil's such a great poet. That the Greeks arriving from Tenedos I think we're supposed to see them as kind of, they're like the serpents. So the serpents that came to get Laocoon, and now the Greeks are coming for everybody. So again, Laocoon is kind of a stand-in for Troy.
Right.
And so they're arriving, coiling in from the same place to do something on a grander scale.
Right. So last week we had 4 mooing.
Yes.
This could be like 4 snaking.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, 4 snaking.
And speaking of 4 snaking, it's time for the ads.
Let's do it. This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Ratio Coffee. Ratio Coffee, Mark Helwig and his crack team of coffee experts, they've done it. They have created these wonderful machines that can sit on your countertop and shame every other appliance in your house. They're beautiful works of art, and they produce tremendous cups of coffee.
That's right.
Morning after morning.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mark asked himself a simple question. Given all the advances in brew technology, in coffee shops and so forth, how come the home coffee maker has been trapped in the dark ages?
Yeah. I was, when we were first talking about getting them as a sponsor or seeking them out and thinking about kind of the history of coffee, you would think that, I remember, back in the 90s and when the kind of Seattle culture was in, it seemed like, hasn't that been done to death?
Right.
A coffee shop in every corner,
right?
Blar Blux and all those guys.
Bar Stucks.
Right. But Helwig's genius was, let's bring it into the home.
That's right.
Take it off the street corner.
Really high quality.
Yeah.
Now you've upgraded to the 8 recently. Tell us about that experience.
Very happy with it. It's a beautiful machine. The carafe is this hand-blown glass work of art.
Borosilicate.
Borosilicate,
Not
yeah.
just boro, not just silicate.
Borosilicate, both of those together.
That's right.
Right. Yeah, I just love the way it pours. It's such an elegant machine.
It is.
Right. I feel like I'm not good enough for it.
I wish my washing machine could live up to that kind of standard. I mean, what an ugly piece of junk sitting there, you know?
Yeah.
What is the washing machine? Maybe Mark should get on that, you know, the ratio 25 washing machine.
Yeah.
Because he'd make it look beautiful, like
would.
this coffee machine.
Exactly. So my ratio, it sits like right above my dishwasher.
Okay.
And that dishwasher just looks sad and grumpy and unwashed.
Yeah, that's how it goes. But you got some walnut accents.
Walnut accents, the stainless steel finish,
perfect.
And the glass borosilicate carafe. It's
Now, which of your children is going to inherit this when you pass on to glory?
Oh, this will be in my casket with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say the audience wants to get some of this coffee action.
Yeah.
What do they need to do?
Well, they got to go to ratiocoffee.com, ratio.coffee.com, and they can select either the 6 or the 8, whatever is, whatever your vibe, man.
That's right. Whatever's your vibe, man.
And if
15%?
15% off.
Don't they have to enter a coupon code?
Yes, they have to enter in ANCO 89, which will be a code good until the end of this month.
That's right, until June 30.
June 30. And you'll get 15% off one of these, or both if you want these great machines.
Check it out. This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by Hackett Publishing, Hackett. Hackett Publishing, who have been with us from the very beginning of this little podcast, have supported the classics. They have refused to let the classics be canceled or pushed back onto the shelf. They've said, no, we're going to support the classics, and we're going to publish some fantastic works to help you in your study of the classics. Jeff,
Yep.
Without mentioning the covers.
I can't mention the covers this time.
Which we know you love.
Yes.
The Euripides Bacchae, I'll mention them. The moon landing on the Odyssey, and the Normandy for the Iliad, and the Vietnam War Memorial for the Aeneid.
Yeah.
Can't do any of that, Jeff. I
can't.
What do you like about Hackett?
I'll say affordable.
All right.
Right. You'd be hard pressed to find a collection of these kinds of works at a better price.
Yes, but usually affordable means junk. Like if you buy the generic peanut butter, there's real chalk mixed in.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I'm talking about.
Vitamin K.
Right. And the Cheerios,
Yeah.
They're like a cardboard O's if you buy the generic kind.
Right.
So that's what we're getting with Hackett, right?
Not
Because
at all.
affordable means trash?
No. They found a way to kind of thread this needle that affordable doesn't have to mean that. It can mean you can get a high quality translation at a very agreeable, affordable price.
But only one translator per major work.
No.
Right?
I mean, that's where again Hackett kind of like the gates of Troy, wide open. Although in a happy kind of way. Lots of
bringing literary destruction into your home.
That's right. So many different translators for the same work. You can pick and choose what you want to read. So even in this podcast, we're using Lombardo's translation, and the other one is Krizak's translation.
For Ovid, you've got Lombardo and the Ambrose translation. They have multiple copies of Plato's Republic by different translators. The New Aristotle series. All right, so let's cut to the chase here. The listener wants to get some high-quality, affordable translations of the classics and other works. What are they going to do?
They're going to go to hackettpublishing.com. They're going to search through their wonderful, amazing catalog, find the works they want, put them in their little satchel, and type in the coupon code AN2022. And that will get them 2 wonderful things, 20% off your order and free shipping.
That's incredible. Check it out.
This episode of Ad Nauseam also brought to you by Pop City Popcorn, our newest, our latest and greatest, not greatest, but a wonderful sponsor.
They're pretty great.
They're pretty great.
Of all the popcorn that we promote on this podcast, this is by far the best.
By far the best, right. Dave, what do you like from their selections?
Well, my family, we're popcorn people.
You are?
We always have been popcorn people. That's right. And I just love the fact that they have such delicious popcorn. In fact, Mrs. Noe was talking about one of the cheddar varieties tonight that they have. Maybe it's bacon cheddar, maybe just the regular cheddar. Mm-hmm. There's no cellulose, no powders, nothing artificial or nonsensy that is put into the popcorn mix.
No, it's the real deal.
It is.
Yep.
And so I love that bacon cheddar. That's really excellent. And I'm more of a savory than a sweet guy.
Yeah.
But some of their sweet popcorn varieties also excellent, like the butter rum.
The butter rum and the two-way drizzle.
Yeah.
That's what my boys, kind of sugaraholics love.
Of course.
Right. I'm more of a savory guy too.
You've been feeding them Twizzlers, right? So
yeah, exactly, nonstop. Exactly. But I love the Parmesans too. And I
Yeah.
always consider myself kind of a popcorn purist. Just give me some little salt, maybe a little bit of butter. But
Right.
this has kind of opened my eyes to a new world.
That's right. So if you want to enjoy the AN life, like we like to describe, you're drinking great coffee, you're reading great literature, and you're eating great popcorn.
Yes.
What does the listener need to do?
You need to go to popcitypopcorn.com. Pick out the varieties that you love, and in the coupon box you type in ANPOP, ANPOP
20.
ANPOP 20.
Yes, it's AN Pop 20, Jeff.
ANPOP 20.
Let's get this. Now, this is a local concern, isn't it? This is from Kalamazoo.
Kalamazoo, just down the road, a fur piece.
That's right.
Yep.
And they've been popping this great popcorn, a family-owned business. I think it's our first Michigan-based sponsor, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah. Right.
So we'd love it if you give them a shot.
Right.
Order some popcorn.
If you're enjoying this podcast, we'd be very, very appreciative if you send them a little business. AN Pop 20. What's the website again?
It's popcitypopcorn.com, and it'll get them 20% off their first order.
Excellent. All right, Jeff. So as we get back into it, we're almost to the point of Priam's death.
We are.
Okay.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about the dangers of deceit.
Right. So as we were talking about how this kind of very Roman idea that it's better to meet on the open battlefield than to kind of use trickery. It's fascinating that the Trojans themselves, in their panic, as they're waking up and hearing the clash of battle and seeing the flames, they're just trying to decide what to do.
Right.
And so some of these Trojans get together and they decide. The only way we're going to be able to maybe get out of here is to disguise ourselves as Greeks.
Have you ever been woken out of a very sound sleep by a noise or by a family member?
It's horrible.
It is. Yeah. I woke up a family member recently so that they could get to an appointment on time, and I knew that this person was going to react strongly but there was no alternative, right?
Yeah.
So I said, so and so, wake up, and the person just leapt out of bed. Terrified, you know? And I said, it's okay. Everything's going to be fine. Don't worry. But I've experienced that myself. Mm-hmm. It's an excruciatingly uncomfortable feeling.
Yes, it is. And it's magnified. I remember a few nights ago, a broom that was just standing up against the wall kind of slid off and hit the ground. Oof. And the sound, as I woke up, it was this cacophony, right? Like, ooh, somebody breaking into the house.
Right, like a slap or a shot.
But it was just a broom falling over. So it's everything is kind of amped up too.
That's correct, because your senses are so lulled and the environment is generally quiet, and then something punctures that environment.
So jarring.
Yes. So this is what happened to. This is where I'm going. This is what happened to the Trojans that night.
Right. So a few of them decide to, they find some, armor scattered about from Greeks that have already been killed. Let's disguise ourselves as Greeks.
Let's go moto Greco, right?
Exactly right. And so here the Trojans, in a small way, are kind of trying their hand at the Greek way of doing things. And I find it so interesting is that Aeneas tells us it backfires. So one of the players here is a Coroebus. And it's his idea. Lombardo's translation, he says, let's follow fortune's lead and exchange our armor for Danan gear. Who cares if this is deceit or valor? Isn't it fascinating that he even asked that question?
Right.
So he's almost kind of giving away he's
so
basically
Vergil's
saying,
trying to put his finger on it for us in case we missed it.
Exactly right.
But it's not heavy-handed.
No, but it's almost like the guy himself is pausing and saying, like, ordinarily we wouldn't do this.
Right.
But it's so desperate. Who cares?
Right.
And he says the enemy will supply us with weapons. And so they disguise themselves as Greeks, and what they quickly find is that other Trojans see them, and of course, what do? They start shooting arrows at them.
Friendly fire. Yeah, it's not going to work.
It's terrible. Yep. And so the whole thing backfires. Many of them are killed by their fellow Trojans. Coroebus, he himself ends up being killed. And I thought this was just an interesting detail that Aeneas notes that another one of his friends here, comrades here, Panthus, is killed. And Aeneas notes that even his piety did not save him. And he notes that he was wearing a fillet of Apollo.
Right.
And
so
Apollo
a fillet is a I'm sorry to interrupt, but a fillet for our audience is a fancy headband.
Fancy headband, right.
You don't wear it to the tennis court. It's something that you wear to a sacrifice or a ritual.
Right.
And it's a mark or an indicator that says, don't shoot. I'm sacred.
Exactly. And that didn't but I thought that was an interesting detail that, Aeneas here, Pius Aeneas, notes that one of his comrades who apparently was marked by piety himself, it did not save him in this moment. Yeah.
And then we come to the rape of Cassandra. A horrible episode or incident in this epic.
Right.
Deeply disturbing.
Yeah. So the Greeks are kind of making their way up the levels of the city, and that's the way I always imagine it. Do you Tolkien guy? Are you?
Yes,
Tolkien
that's
guy?
right.
So it reminds me.
No, I'm not a Tolkien guy.
But do you know
because I don't like all the association.
the associate? What is this?
Anytime anything becomes too popular, I don't want to be associated.
Oh, I got
with
you.
it.
Yeah, I got you.
But
right.
I do know the books. I've read them multiple times.
Right.
and-
But there's a city that is besieged and taken called Minas Tirith.
That's right.
And it's also kind of built in kind of these layers, these tiers, and the citadel is the very top.
Right.
And I often kind of picture that kind of thing happening here.
In Troy.
The Greeks started at the bottom, and they're making their way up to the citadel, to the temple, to the palace.
Right.
And that's where they find Cassandra, and they tie her up and drag her away by her hair.
Right. Can I read some of the Latin there before
Yeah.
you read the Lombardo translation?
Sure.
Okay, so this goes: Hel nihil invitis fasquemquam fidere divis, ecatrahe batur passis priamea virgo, crenibus a templo Cassandra ditisque Minervae, ad caelum tendens ardentia lumina frustra, lumina nam teneras arcebant vincula palmas.
Yes, it strikes me that isn't the first time that we see Aeneas himself in the epic. He's stretching his hands.
That's right.
It's almost the exact same Latin.
You're right.
isn't it?
His duplices palmas, his twin palms, but here they are, the tender palms, the teneras palmas.
Yes, and Lombardo translate this thusly: never rely on the gods for anything against their will. The next thing we saw was Cassandra, Priam's daughter, being dragged, hair streaming from the shrine of Minerva's temple, lifting to heaven her burning eyes, her eyes only, for her tender hands were bound. Yeah. It's a brutal scene.
And then she's taken back, as we know, she's taken back to Mycenae, where she's killed by Clytemnestra.
Yeah.
An innocent person mistreated by the horrors of war.
And not only that, it's even worse. She can see it coming, and because of her kind of her cursed gift of prophecy,
Yes.
she sees it coming and can do absolutely nothing about it.
Yeah, that's a story we'll have to tell sometime from Ovid, one of the vignettes. How she got this prophetic gift from failed romance with Apollo.
Yep. Yeah. A lot of bad things happen when Apollo's. He was a bad breaker-upper.
Absolutely. Terrible. So now we come to Hecuba and Priam.
Yeah, so Aeneas tells us that women and children are shrieking, they're freaking out, they're taking refuge up in the temple of Minerva. And in Lombardo's translation, Aeneas says, I saw Hecuba with her 100 daughters, and Priam polluting with his blood the very altars he had consecrated himself, which I thought was an interesting detail. And remember last week we were talking about this idea of kind of this twisting of this reversal of religious meaning and meaning of sacrifice.
Yeah, the perversion of the ritual.
And so this idea that Priam, again, completely innocent, he's a victim here, polluting with his own blood. He's performing a kind of sacrilege, but not out of any kind of malice.
No.
But he's polluting the altar of Minerva with his own blood, and it's almost like he's setting himself. It's a prelude to his own sacrifice at the altar.
Right.
Yeah. It's brutal.
And then we go on to the sociopathy of Pyrrhus or Neoptolemus.
Yeah, I thought this was really interesting. Is that so Achilles has a son, which correct me if I'm wrong, but he does not. So Vergil calls him Pyrrhus or Neoptolemus.
Right.
Same guy. He does not figure in the Iliad, right? Do we even hear about?
No,
Achilles'
I don't believe so.
So he's kind of a newish character on the scene. Not that Vergil invents him.
No, he's part of the epic tradition. He's not part of the Iliad, to my knowledge. I also was kind of shocked because I thought when I first read this, and maybe other readers have this experience, that Achilles was a youngish man.
Yeah.
Right? That Achilles was maybe 25, 26. Yeah. So how could he have a full-grown son who's involved in battle?
Right.
And, most of the Hollywood portrayals, Achilles is a younger man. But in order for the timeline to work, now here you're going to say, that's not a question you're supposed to ask. But I'm not going to play my own game here.
Right.
I'm going to break the rules. He'd have to be in his mid-30s in order or later for Neoptolemus to be old enough to be involved in battle.
At least, right. I think it's one of those details that I'm sure Homer was aware of, but he ignores. Mm-hmm. The idea with kind of the business of Achilles and his heel. Homer never mentions that.
No.
But yeah, it does kind of pause and say, well, wait, how old was he when he got there?
Work?
Right? Did he? Was Neoptolemus brought over when he was a kid and he kind of grew up at Troy? It's hard to.
It is.
It's hard to square, but
he's not in the tent. In the famous scene of Book 9 of the Iliad, he's nowhere to be found.
No, exactly.
You would think if he were Achilles' son, he'd be around there somewhere, carrying firewood or roasting marshmallows or something.
Yeah, exactly. But I thought this was fascinating that, I mean, he's a psychopath in this scene.
Would you say that he's the embodiment of all the worst aspects of his father?
Yes, I mean, I thought this was fascinating that he kind of he embodies that mania and the rage, right? That Achilles, that kind of forms Achilles in the Iliad. But I thought this was very interesting that Achilles' rage, as horrific as it was, there was a reason for it, right? He went after Hector because Hector killed Patroclus.
That's right. Hector killed an innocent child.
Yes.
In Achilles' eyes.
In Achilles' eyes, right? So there was kind of a locus for his rage. And as Priam even tries to remind Pyrrhus in the moment, says, listen, even your father set aside his, even your father gave Hector's body back, right?
Yeah, the famous scene in book, what is it, 22, 23?
Yeah.
The ransom of Hector in the tent of Achilles.
Right. It's where we see Achilles become human again.
Correct.
And Priam's trying to remind him of this. And Pyrrhus is just, nope, you're a dead man.
Right.
And I thought this was so fascinating that he's an embodiment of kind of the worst of his father's rage, but it has why is he going after Priam? Is it just simply it's bloodlust, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yes,
it's also a kind of a prize idea, to kill the king of the whole enterprise.
Yes, but to do it in a temple at an altar. I mean, there's all
an
kinds
old man. What kind of glory is there in killing a helpless opponent on the altar?
Right. There's no glory, I think, that in this, and I think that even maybe even Achilles at the height of his rage would even have recognized that this is a bridge too far.
Now, Jeff, when you teach this epic, how do your students usually react? Do they ever say, "Oh, this just glorifies violence"?
I have that when I teach the Iliad, particularly when I ask my students, have you read this before? Some of them will read pieces of it in ninth grade, or more often they're familiar with movie portrayals, and it's often it's kind of usually my male students who will kind of look at this as kind of the war is cool, right? The kind of the clash of swords and spears.
Right.
It's kind of as an element of.
They start making lightsaber sounds.
Exactly right. So they like kind of the heroism of it, but often kind of their where does that go? What do you mean by the heroism? What do you mean by courage? It's often very, very shallow.
Okay.
And so they'll often take their takeaway from the Iliad is that's kind of a glorification of war.
Right.
And it's
what do you think about that?
One of the goals of a teacher is to show them that it's really quite the opposite of that. It's the futility of war. It's like in Achilles' case, it's the ability of war to turn a man into a monster.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's all on the page here.
Yeah. So the man into the monster is Neoptolemus.
Neoptolemus, right? Yep. And he does not. We do not see him set aside the monster and regain his humanity like his dad did. And this scene, which I would vote for, certainly the most chilling scene in this book, perhaps the most chilling scene in the whole epic, is where Priam, who first Pyrrhus spears one of Priam's children right in front of him.
Right.
And Priam.
So that one goes down. Now Priam is standing in blood.
He's standing in blood. He's at the altar. He's kind of pathetically in his old armor.
Right. This is just trophy armor that was hung in the halls, never meant to be used.
Right. It just kind of adds to kind of the oddity, the pathos to it. And Priam in that moment, he tries to remind Pyrrhus, even your dad set aside his rage. Even your dad gave, Hector's body back to me. And then what Pyrrhus says to him is just before he kills him, in Lombardo's translation, he says, well, then you can take this news to my father, in the underworld, right?
Right.
The son of Peleus. Be sure to tell him about my sad behavior and how degenerate his son has become. Now die. And so saying, he dragged Priam, trembling and slipping in his son's blood, up to the altar. Winding his left hand in the old man's hair, with his right he lifted his flashing sword and buried it up to its hilt in his side.
Yeah, in Priam's side.
Yeah. I mean, those lines there, the dripping dark sarcasm. You make sure when you see my dad, tell him how bad of a boy I've become.
Yeah. Desperate.
It's desperate. It's horrific, right? And if we think about even that scene in Book 11 of the Odyssey, where Odysseus meets the ghost of Achilles,
right?
Achilles.
He has a very different message.
A very different message.
Yeah, don't throw everything into war.
No,
it's better to serve above than be a king down here.
Down here, right?
Life is worth living, even in a very limited and captive state.
Right. And
not
so,
Pyrrhus's attitude.
Exactly right. And so you have to think that Vergil's original audience would have known Odyssey Book 11 very, very well, and maybe even Vergil intends for them to think about that Neoptolemus doesn't understand his own father at all. Right.
Should we read a little bit of that Latin?
Yeah. Would you do that for us?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Qui Pyrrhus refereser gaicet nuntius ibis, peli da genetor li mea tristia facta, de generem quene optalemum nardradre memento, nunc more rocti canes altariad ipsa trementem, troxitet in multo lapsantem sanguinanati. There's that part there, right? Lapsantem sanguinanati, having slipped in the blood of his son.
Yeah.
Implicavit quecomam laewa dextrae quecordruscum, extulit ac lateri capello tennis abdidit ensem.
Yeah.
Yeah, buried the sword, abdidit ensem.
Right. And never forgetting that this is taking place not on the battlefield, but at the altar of Minerva.
Yeah.
Right? A perverted sacrifice.
Well, it's like the scene in, is it the second Godfather, where there's the murder at the that's going on while they're showing the mass?
I think that's the first.
Is that the first one?
Yes, exactly.
Switching back and forth between the two perspectives. The family is celebrating mass in the cathedral and the church.
You've seen The Godfather.
I've seen all three.
All three? Oh, I'm sorry about the third one.
Yeah, so is everyone else.
But that's a great corollary. That's a brilliant scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take place there, but you get to see the two things juxtaposed.
Right.
Yeah. So Pyrrhus is what his father would have been if he had survived?
Well, I don't know. I think we're supposed to see that Pyrrhus is a extremely unworthy heir to his father's heroism, such as it was. Achilles set aside his monstrousness, at least in that moment. Pyrrhus has not learned, and maybe never will learn what that means.
So at this moment of profundity and high pathos, should we engage in some crass commercialism?
Oh, what did you have in mind? What are you interrupting this for?
Well, because, Jeff,
Yeah?
I just read some Latin, and maybe some of our audience would like to learn how to do that too.
Oh, of course, right. You're talking about LPSI.
Yes, I am.
Oh, yeah.
Lingua Latina per se illustrata.
Tell us about it.
Well, they need to go to, well, you changed your tune quickly. They need to go to latinperdiem.com and check out a lot of my free instruction. latinperdiem.com/LLPSI, and you can sign up for my course, $199. It goes ab initio, I'd like to say, from the ground up. And you can gain real skill in reading Latin. Eventually, you can learn how to scan poetry. You can come to our weekly office hours, and I can teach you how to scan the very first day if you're up for it.
Scanning on the first day.
Sure, I can teach that.
Fantastic.
In an hour's time, you could learn to do it. It's really not difficult.
Yeah, excellent. Check it out.
All right. So we got to wrap up here pretty soon,
We do.
Jeff. But where are we headed as we wind down?
Well, Aeneas himself is, he's watching, he's seeing all of this, and despite what the ghost of Hector has told him, he still seems really frozen.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's the idea that
The ghost of Hector appeared to him bedraggled, right?
Yes.
And Aeneas at that point didn't know Hector was dead.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Exactly.
This is the first indication. His beard was clotted with blood because he'd been dragged around the city and all of that.
Yeah.
Didn't know he was dead.
And he tells him, I think it's the first time that Aeneas hears that Hector, you need to get out of here.
God is born. Quit the city.
Quit the city. You've got new walls to build somewhere
Right.
else. But he still seems, he doesn't know what to do. Even that scene that the Sklenar article too is that what is Aeneas doing? He's watching this. He watches this murder of Priam. Why is he just standing there? Right?
Well, it's the definition of a nightmare, right? You must have had those dreams, nightmares where you're trying to run or something,
Sure.
and your legs won't move. You have some urgent thing to do, but you don't know what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
I have this experience.
Exactly. While there are kind of swans juggling pickles in the periphery, and right, all kinds of other.
Mine are
obvious-
not usually quite that absurd, but there's some pressing thing I have to do, and I'm physically incapable of doing it.
I know that dream.
Overcome with some kind of torpor.
Right. Yeah. So
And yes, I use words like torpor in my dreams. This is what Aeneas is experiencing.
So he's just simply frozen by the horror of it.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think that's an astute reading of this. But he's beyond that scene. He's torn. Do I stay and fight and likely die in some kind of heroic but failed last stand?
Right.
Or do I cut and run? All right. I think he's trying to where's the valor in this? Where's the piety in this?
Right.
What's my action here?
Right. And I think there are 2 major episodes remaining that we're going to have to get to in the next episode of the podcast.
Okay.
And the last 2 episodes are the encounter with Helen
Yes.
and then Creusa, who gets lost in the shuffle, and she also appears to him in a dream.
Right.
And there's some deep pathos there, of course.
Yes, and I'd also like to cover this fascinating passage where his mom, shows up again.
Yes.
And kind of lifts the veil from his eyes and kind of shows him, encouraging him to leave, says, look, these are what the gods are doing right now that you can't even see, to kind of show him how desperate and hopeless this is. Yeah.
It's like Hebrew scriptures in some ways, where people's eyes are open to see what's really going on. The horses and chariots of Israel are marching through the treetops.
Oh yeah.
I think it's in First Chronicles. But,
yeah.
It's like that.
Yeah.
There's a spiritual world that's going on, and you can't see it. But if your eyes are opened, suddenly you realize this is it.
Yes, but that will have to wait until next time.
All right.
We're up against it. All right, so before we get out of here, though, Dave, would you tell us something about the Moss method?
What? More crass commercialism?
More crass, craven.
I thought this was about the literary life, not filthy lucre.
A little bit of lucre along the way. There's nothing wrong with that.
I love to say the word lucre because it's so ridiculously spelled. Lucre?
Yeah, it's like Brett Favre. Favre.
Yeah. Some filthy lucre. You too can play for the Minnesota Vikings.
Vikings, yes.
Because that's where he ended up,
He did. But he was most famous as a Packer.
That's correct.
Yes.
Speaking of Packers, if you want to study Greek, you need to go to mossmethod.com, check out all my free instruction, and sign up for the course. We've got some good response lately. People signing up, coming to the office hours on Friday. I take them from, what do I take them from? Neoprene?
No, it's from a neophyte.
To what? Creosote?
Erudite.
Erudite.
Yes.
All right. So it's neophyte to erudite.
Yes.
Okay. It costs $325. Mm-hmm. Can you tell them about the office hours? This seems to be your favorite part.
This is where on Friday, where you send in some generic flanky to talk to the. Wait, no, there's no flanky. There's no flanky.
No flanky?
No, you're there.
I got to go myself?
Dave is there.
Okay.
And he's hosting the office hours on Friday where people...
Do I hold forth?
You hold forth, but you get to meet people from around the world.
That's right.
Reading Greek together. It's a wonderful thing.
How come you haven't joined us yet, Jeff?
Nobody's invited me.
Maybe I should send you the Zoom link and just think how this class would explode.
Could I pop in? Can I bomb the office hours?
Photobomb the office hours? Because people are thinking, Noe, but I want to interact with a Winkle.
Yeah, I can understand.
He's the funny one.
That's right. So if they go to mossmethod.com, they can find all this stuff.
That's right. They can sign up for the course.
Excellent. All right. Who do we got to thank?
Well, we need to thank Mishka, our sound engineer, who puts this together so nicely. She's having a little bit of tech issues this week, but she's going to get through them.
Okay.
And then she's going to put together a lovely podcast.
She always does such a nice job.
Yes, she does. We need to thank Scott Van Zen, who's a cross between Eddie Van Halen and Stevie Ray Vaughan. Guy can play the blues.
No other. Guy's amazing.
Yes, gives us all this music. And Ken Tamplin of the famous Vocal Academy, who gives us the bumper music and composed, I think, all the music that appears on the podcast. And he gives us the gurgle music, too.
That's great. And do yourself a favor. Check out his vocal reactions.
Yeah, they're funny, aren't they?
To various vocalists. He's so witty.
Yeah.
And he knows what he's talking about.
He absolutely does. 5-octave range.
Yeah.
Incredible
Amazing.
singer.
Yeah. All right, so hey, if you want to get a shout out like Mr. Rodney Kroom got on the top of this episode, you should drop us a note.
Yes.
Right to Dave at adnauseam.com. Don't forget the V.
Or Jeff at adnauseam.com. There's a V in Navseam too. And, tell Jeff what you like about him and, how does he put up with me? And, you love the show, you love his contributions, do that kind of thing.
And Rodney, in his email, he gave us a suggestion of some things that he would like to hear on the show.
Oh, you're just mentioning that because it was about your dissertation.
Well, that was, now that you bring it up.
This thing from your mind.
Right. But we love that kind of stuff.
That's
we want to hear what you're interested in, and we always love ideas for new shows.
Yeah, you could go to the website, adnauseam.com. You could pick up a Quai No Kent Do Kent t-shirt or some other paraphernalia.
Very stylish, comes in different colors and whatever size you need.
And where are we going next week with episode 87?
Well, we're going to finish up book 2. I promise we're going to finish up book 2.
Oh, I don't know.
And
we've made a lot of crazy promises.
I know, and maybe even make some strides into book 3. Would
3?
it be?
I think that follows 2.
Yes, 2. Finish up 2, and we'll get into 3. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And we're probably going to interrupt this Aeneid. This travel through the Aeneid at some point, aren't we? And do some other things.
Yeah.
Keep the people listening.
Exactly. You don't want to suffer from Vergil fatigue.
No,
I can't imagine such a thing. But if it were to happen.
A case of VF.
Yes.
And Jeff, I believe you have the gustatory parting shot to take us out.
Yes, this comes from Justin Swap in his book, The Shadow Servant. He writes, you never cook onions with your beans. That's a recipe for tear gas. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.